everybody, and welcome to True Crime Banter, the podcast aimed at bringing you your dose of murder relaxation. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Ready as you'll ever be?
I don't think I'll ever not feel like I'm in a spaceship with that song.
True. Well, you don't really do a lot of technology stuff, so I feel like anything technology, you just refer to it being a spaceship, whether it's an updated car or I don't know.
It's true. A car that has cruise control?
Exactly.
When
You're
you've
like,
never
this is
had that before?
Spaceship.
It does seem futuristic.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
Hi. Hello
This
again.
is,
for the second time now, at least for me.
Yeah, Christian and Riley. We've gotten a lot of, I think, good feedback so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like everyone enjoyed that last episode.
And if there's any bad feedback...
Fuck off.
True, fuck off. But also thank you for not telling me and ruining the vibes.
we do appreciate,
that to yourself.
constructive criticism.
Right. Don't be an ass. Yeah.
Don't be an ass.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. This is episode 7 now, I believe, of the True Crime Banter podcast. And if you guys just heard a door slam, well, one, you can see this on YouTube. We are recording it. If it looks like shit or if it's not actually video on YouTube like the last episode, it's because it looks like shit.
Yeah.
We're figuring this out.
I've
got shit like duct tape all over the place.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I said that in the last one. It's a work in progress.
Yes. We are switching roles on this one.
Yeah.
We're gonna see how it goes.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I'm kind of a storyteller all the time anyway. It honestly, you already know this. Not everybody knows this, but it could be the smallest thing, and I will turn it into an hour-long thing. To Riley, at least. True. To Riley, because I know he'll sit there and listen.
I think we usually spend
grace.
probably 10 to 15 minutes a day of you telling me everything you possibly could that happened throughout the day.
Yes.
Most of it, I enjoy.
Which doesn't seem like that long, but when you're constantly talking and don't take a breath, it's a lot of information being thrown at you.
Yeah, I was like, I did not need to know that the old man was wondering why he was peeing constantly at night. But and the lady at Super Supplements could not help him.
That's a story for another time.
Yeah. We're going to get into some bit of banter, which we didn't do in the last episode because I think we got frazzled. I got frazzled a little bit.
Yeah, I think I was just stoked to get into it.
True,
you were totally skipped over the whole, what is it, a third of our title that we just skipped out on, the whole banter part. We just went to the true crime part.
We did 2/3 of a show last time, so we're going to do a full show this time.
Yep.
And for today's bit of banter, I'm going to take the lead.
Okay.
And I'm going to pose, not a question, but I was thinking about this the other day, and it was actually, how should I say, as a cat jumps on the desk, and the cat is now off the desk. Okay, so I was thinking the other day, you know how they say, like, every 7 years your taste buds change?
Okay.
And obviously that is something that you and I are kind of active in. We're not afraid to, like, try new things.
Yeah.
And tomatoes are still not a thing either of us like. But I was wondering,
not
because...
for lack of trying, though. I do try pretty frequently.
Very true. Cherry tomatoes was the last thing I tried of those.
I just can't.
The worst.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
More for you
for all you tomato lovers.
Yep.
So I was thinking about how if your taste buds change, you obviously taste things differently.
Yeah.
Now, what about nostalgia? Mm-hmm. Because I know that when there's certain smells or certain things that I guess eat or taste, it kind of brings me back to like childhood or teenage years. You know, it always just flashback what nostalgia is. Is it possible that because your taste buds change so often, and possibly your smell? I mean, what if you got COVID and you can't smell or smell changes to you.
Yeah.
Are there memories that you're just never gonna remember again, that are just lost
because they are linked to smell? And
exactly.
Smell and taste. Yeah,
exactly. Or I mean, I know like Elon Musk is out there saying that with Neuralink you're eventually gonna be able to recall like everything or know everything. I have no idea
what any of that is, but I believe you because you're all up to date on that nerd stuff. So
it's like spaceship stuff. So you might not be interested.
Right. Yeah.
But is it possible that you just have memories that are only accessible because of your brain's ability to connect it, or like you said, link it to a taste or a smell? And then if you lose your ability to taste that exact same taste, might you never unlock that memory again?
I'm gonna go with yes. I don't know if it was my turn.
We lost them forever?
Yeah, I think so, because there's,
all right,
I'm not going to say a bunch, but there's been at least a few times in the past 5 to 10 years that something has happened. The one I remember most recently was actually a really long time ago, that I was at this little smoothie stand kind of nearby. Well, it was a coffee stand, but I ordered a smoothie, and the taste was like it felt like I was like 5 years old. It's really weird. Right. And I had to pull the car over because I was so distracted that I was like, what the hell is this? And still even
you were just like, I'm back in a 5-year-old body, so weird. I shouldn't be driving.
So weird. And I'm just thinking like who I spent the most time with when I was that age was my grandma.
Okay.
And so I mean, there was nobody there around to taste the smoothie to like be like, oh yeah, it's from this.
Remember.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's this time.
So that wasn't one of those weird things where I could ask somebody or So I just remember it was from when I was really young.
Okay.
And I lived across the water at some point, whatever. And I'm not going to get too much into it, but there was
the water.
No, it was not luxurious at all. But I can only think that maybe it was something that, you give to kids when they're younger, whether it's like a puree or something.
Right,
I don't know how to really describe it, but something you just give kids. I don't know what the heck. A yogurt, maybe, something like that. But the taste was so specific there's no way in the world that would have come to me unless I tasted it. Okay. So if I didn't have my taste at the time, if COVID was a thing way back then, I am 99.9% sure I would have never even known what that was. Or had that recall ever if it wasn't for that.
So what was it the other day where we were like, this tastes like those old like rocket pop
what was that? You're right.
This is terrible if neither of us
I know. What was that? Oh, it was a drink that we had at the restaurant before we went to go see Jackass.
Which was amazing. It was the dragon meal, which is something I'm going to
You're probably going to see it in one of the next podcasts because we've talked about drinking it on the show.
Yes.
But yes.
Speaking of drinking on the show, we will be doing that here shortly.
I've been doing that.
Doing it.
Yeah.
I will be.
I got
if you guys can
start
see here
for the both of us
on camera. Sorry to all you audio listeners.
Yeah, it's a little shot.
I got a little shot, the very last of Tennessee Fire that I had left.
Which is what you were drinking last time.
Exactly.
And I'm drinking what I had last time.
Bingo.
Some Tito's with some White Claw. Yeah.
Well, this should be a good show then.
Yeah.
You want to get to the story? Actually, first I got to take this shot.
Yes.
To cheers to your flamingo.
Thank you.
And I'm not gonna be chasing it with anything, but I do have some tea here.
What a man!
Would be terrible to try to chase it with. Yeah. What kind of tea is that, by the way? I don't remember even. Screw it. I'm just gonna shout it. I don't care.
I like it. You're so youthful. You have your shot of whiskey, and then you go back to your old people tea, which is, by the way...
Well, hot damn.
Yep. It's... What is it? It's Breathe Easy.
It is.
For anybody with congestion issues, Breathe Easy tea.
That is myself,
terribly. And minty probiotic tea.
Bingo.
So
that's the second time I said that today.
Quite the senior citizen combo we have going on
Also,
here.
real quick, before we end this bit of banter.
Okay. I think people want to know what the case is.
How do you take your shots? Because...
I take it in 3 shots because I'm...
Right, but do you just swallow it as fast as you can?
Yeah.
Plug my obviously nose. Most people are you just open up your throat and you just gulp it real quick. I can't even
do that. I take it in 3 because most people's shot glasses, their shots are a small drink to me.
True. Yeah. You need a straw for a shot.
Yeah.
But This is why I like stuff like Fireball or Tennessee Fire, because I like the taste of that shit.
Yeah,
and like
that's
it will
better.
like I hold it in my mouth.
I know people
and
say
enjoy
it's
it.
for like what do they call it? Like
The fruits of your labor.
sorority girls. It's like sorority girl drink. It's like for
Excuse me.
chicks. Like anyway.
Excuse me.
Anyways.
Before we get into the story, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors.
We're not doing sponsors.
Okay, all right, no sponsors, but I am gonna let our cat out because he
Okay.
needs to get out of this damn room.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead. Thank you to our sponsor, Abu. Let's get into the story.
So this was the case that last time when we talked about our last one, I chose that one too. And if you haven't already listened to that one, the Missing Panama Hikers, our last episode, feel free to go listen to that one after this one. But I also chose that one because that one had some mystery, some creepiness to it, all the good stuff. And it was somewhat modern enough that it was kind of relatable in a sense. There was...
Correct.
Yeah.
Something that I think you and I could very much put ourselves in the shoes of what happened.
Right,
to
and
those
they had
girls.
similar enough technology, and there's all kinds of stuff that plays into it. But then
like you said, go listen to it.
Right.
It's definitely very relatable.
And if you're somebody that likes concise answers and a conclusion, maybe not the best, but it's still a good background story, which we talk about too. I mean, it's still something that has a good story. But when in the last one, I had said that I wanted to choose the next episode as well. And this is one.
I think you said we were going to rock, paper, scissors, and I said, we'll talk about it. And then you said, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, and that's what I mean is I said I was going to do it. That's what that meant, in case you didn't know.
Right.
4 years later into this, that's what that means. Rock,
sorry,
paper,
what?
scissors just means I'll do it. Anyway, so this is one that I've been in love with? How do you say that? How do you...
This is a very...
I mean, like we said on the last one, like I said, if you haven't listened to it. But I do mention, and Riley mentions too, that I do like the more messed up ones.
Yeah.
And if you are somebody that also likes those, then you're going to love that. If you don't like the gross stuff, well, too bad.
Right. Yeah, this is one that I was thinking about it as we were getting ready to record this, leading up to it. And there is something about it. I don't know... Maybe we'll talk about it more as we get into it, but I couldn't figure out why this is one that is so attracting to, I guess, normal people.
Yeah.
But there is something about this story that just makes you love it, like weirdly. Right. Not like love it and obviously have, respect to the people that were hurt, but it makes people fascinated for a reason. I mean, multiple reasons. One, how he was even caught, and then the two, the crimes that he committed. You know, and how he was as a person. Like, there's so many aspects that, no matter what your preference of true crime is, or what draws you to true crime, I feel like this story has it all for someone. Yeah,
which I'm going to be honest, before I even was doing research on this one, I only knew so much what now feels as surface level. And, watching documentaries and shows and articles and watching interviews and all that good stuff that comes along with doing something like this, I feel like I only knew the details of the crime, which is what most people will hold on to. Yeah. And not so much the person that did it. I mean, you may know the name, but you don't really go too much into his background and his personality and some weird quirks they may have. When I was telling you about this one, and when I wanted to do this one, this might have been like a day or two ago, I decided that starting at the end, I think, would be better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Not only because of how it comes to an end, but I just think for storytelling purposes, it makes more sense. So, I don't know, maybe I'll just save the name for later, but I guess the story starts on February 8th, 1983. This apartment complex was having drain issues, and people were having issues with their pipes for days and couldn't do their laundry, couldn't do dishes, all the normal things that you expect to be able to do when you're paying rent at a place. Yeah. So people were getting upset and finally wrote a letter to the super and wanted something done about it. So a drain specialist was called out to Cranley Gardens in Muswell Hill, located in London. And the man that showed up was Michael Catron. I'm pretty sure in the stuff that I've heard, it's Catron. I thought it was Catran, but either way. And he worked for a company called Dino-Rod, which, like I said, was a drain specialist company. Exactly. Yeah. And what's like the equivalent here of that? What am I thinking of?
Like Roto-Rooters
That's
or something
what I'm thinking
like
of.
that.
Yeah, I'm like, I know there's a name.
At least in the Northwest. I don't know if they're like a nationwide or countrywide thing. But.
So he showed up and thinking it was probably like a normal blockage, he kind of started his quote-unquote investigation and was able to track it down to this one kind of house, I guess. And this was something I was telling you too, was when I've heard all of the stories about this case in the past, there is a sewer issue, and I've always wondered how they were able to track the issue to a certain tenant or a floor or whatever. And then once I was able to like visualize it based off of like these documentaries and stuff, I was able to see that their version of apartments, at least in the UK at this time in the 80s, you'll find out in the 70s too, 70s and 80s. It's almost like a tall cottage. So there's like 3 floors. At least on this one, there was 3 floors. Yeah. So there was only one of 3 people that this issue was coming from. So Michael Catron got to work and he opened the sewer tank on the side of the house that the blockage was coming from. And he found the source of the blockage. And when he opened it up, he found, quote, lumps of flesh the size of my fist in strips of flesh that looked as though they had been cut from an arm.
Casual.
End quote. Right. So doing some like kind of common sense deducing, right? He first
deducing. Yeah.
I think it's deducing.
Right.
I think so. I mean, yeah.
You're onto something.
He thought maybe this is an animal. I mean, you kind of okay. And something else that came to me doing this was it reminds me of when people find a body. You hear this all the time. I thought it was a mannequin.
Yep, I knew exactly.
Your brain tries to rationalize it.
You always say it's never a mannequin.
And I've said this before, and if this ever happens, if I ever have my own podcast, it will be titled, It's Never a Fucking Mannequin. Because it never is. It never is.
There's so many stories.
Right, that people say it's a mannequin. I would love to hear of a story where it actually is. And then maybe I'll shut up. Yep. But anyway, until then. So I think in this case, it's kind of the same thing, where he was trying to figure out what in the world this could be. Because there's no way your brain could go to, it's human.
Right. Or a mannequin.
Or a mannequin in a drain. Yes. Somebody just shoved pieces of the mannequin in there. But he said that he thought maybe it was an animal. I don't know how in the world pieces of an animal would end up in this sewer tank on the side of the house.
Things happen.
They do. But then he also was like, well, there's no hair or fur with the animal. So unless it's like a bunch of naked mole rats, he was like, this is not, it's not an animal.
Be human flesh.
Well, then he thought, which I think is weird too, this is in a quote, that he thought it may be raw chicken. Somebody had flushed raw chicken. But then he decided it couldn't be because there was so much of it. So I don't know if I would go to raw chicken either. But then at the end of this, he comes to the conclusion.
Raw chicken to clog the sewage would be a lot.
Yeah. I don't know how he came to that. I'm not sure. We'll never know. But yeah. But then he came to the conclusion it's got to be human, which...
Well, I guess I realistically, even if I put myself in the shoes of a plumber, last thing I would think is, oh, this is human flesh.
No,
here,
that's me too.
So
that was the thing that I was thinking of. Is I don't know if I could come to that conclune.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even get as far as chicken. I would just be like, this is weird. Now, I'm calling the cops.
One of the things I do remember is that this, he said it was like one of the worst smells he'd ever smelled, right? Yeah. So I guess that would be the only thing. But also he works
in plumbing / sewage.
So you would think, though, I mean...
That would hold more weight?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So if he's saying this is the worst he's ever smelled, it's probably not your typical sewage issue.
That's what I thought, too.
That is like the only thing I could think could point to possibly like human remains.
Yeah, that's true. And another thing I was thinking is when people, what I've heard is that when people smell rotting, decaying flesh, decomposing, you don't have to ever smell it before to know what it is. That's
because
what I've
it's
heard.
Such a
yeah, so maybe he may have never
odor.
come across it, but he's like, this is not something I've ever smelled before.
Yeah, I could see
then
that.
on top of that, weird chunks of flesh floating around that don't look normal.
Yeah, so you run into a terrible smell and chunks of flesh.
Right,
Probably like,
exactly. So he was like, this is weird. So this is not a normal Tuesday. So so he decided this is a bigger job, and he's like, I need to bring somebody out with me tomorrow. This is not something I can handle today. So on his way out, there was a couple tenants from the same building that were standing outside and were wondering what was going on. Curious bystanders, as there always usually is.
Right.
And they were like, hey, what's going on? And I think one of their names was John Alec. Okay. It's not in my notes, but I'm pretty sure.
Especially when you're dealing with plumbing issues, like the people being affected by like your dishwasher not working properly or something. So you're kind of
especially it's been a few days,
chit-chat.
And they're probably like, what in the world is it? Yeah.
Okay.
They're probably all dads standing out there. It's always dads. They're like, oh,
how about the
I could have fixed it myself. My tool belt.
Anyway, it's like, honey, just leave him alone.
Anyway, so one of the tenants, I'm pretty sure, like I said, was John Alec standing outside. The other one was David Nilsen, or Dennis Nilsen. I'm sorry. He was standing out. And they were standing there. And this was a quote that you actually brought up.
And you didn't realize, because I said, I remember something like this, and you were like, oh, okay, sure.
I don't even remember. I thought he was talking about the raw meat in the tank. Chicken.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But Dennis Nilsen, when the Michael Catron had said, like, yeah, it looks like there's some weird flesh in there. And Dennis Nilsen had said, yeah, it looks like somebody's been flushing their Kentucky Fried Chicken down the drain.
I love it.
Which is a great visual. Yeah. So anyway, so with that note, he headed out. Like I said, he called in a supervisor. He said, you need to come out with me tomorrow. This is just weird looking. I'm not quite sure what I'm even looking at. So the next morning, he shows up with a coworker of his. And to his surprise, there is nothing left in the drain, which only caused more suspicion.
More questions.
There's nowhere for it to go. So, yeah, they didn't know that somebody in the middle of the night had came and cleaned it out. So
maybe they called a competing
in the middle of the night. It's open 24/7.
They're like, you're taking way too long. I need to get a hot shower in.
So yeah. So they call the authorities because this was just sketchy all around, right? Like unidentified substances, and then on top of that, it's now gone. Which is just freaking weird. Yeah. They called the cops, and the cops showed up, and
wait, the plumbing company called the cops?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And if I didn't already say that, then I apologize, because
Dino Rod.
Exactly. When they showed up and there's something in there, they were like, we need to get the cops out here. This is weird. So the authorities showed up, and whoever had cleaned it out did not do the best job. They did a decent enough job that the Dino Rod employees were kind of thrown off. But when they kind of looked in there was still some kind of scraps left over. There was a little bit of this meaty substance left over, and there was also
KFC.
bits of bone, small bits of bone that were left. So it didn't take too long for I think it was a pathologist to confirm that the remains were in fact human. And then, of course, at that point, they're like, what the hell? So now this intense investigation starts.
One of the documentaries I watched regarding this part of the story said that it was a piece of the flesh that had hairs on it that they could tell were human hairs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So this entire story, couldn't progress until they realized that it was actually human hairs on it. So I'm gonna let you continue, but I thought that was something. And this also, take note of this. It'll come up again in a little bit, but at least I'll bring it up in a little bit.
Yeah. So upon finding out that this is human remains, of course they're like, nah, this is super fucked up, so let's get going on this. So like I said before, I was like, how in the world would they find out who it is? But with this specific septic tank, there was only 3 floors of people that all this piping connected to. So it could only be these people. So they found out that the bottom floor people were having issues coming from above, but the second floor level was unoccupied. So that only left them the top floor level, who they found out was occupied by Dennis Nilsen, none other than the KFC quote that came from earlier. Isn't it always someone who's in
maybe
plain
he knows
sight?
something about the first floor tenants. Maybe he sees them Ubering, eats KFC constantly. These fucking
maybe
guys.
That's it. Yeah. So, upon finding out what his name was, they decided to question him. But it was like in the afternoon, so he wasn't home yet. So they decided, we're not taking any chances. We're gonna wait for him outside of his house until he gets home. And I'm pretty sure they said that he works at the local job center. So
like a civil servant or something like that.
No, civil servant is basically the same thing as a policeman. So that's what he was later. So we'll find out later that he was involved in the police force. But at this point, he works at a job center. So I don't know if he has like it's not really clear in a lot of the work in the stuff online that he's maybe like works at a desk, maybe helping people get jobs. I don't know if he's admin. I'm not sure. But not really too important according to the story. But so he gets home and he's surprised to find a police officer, a detective and a couple police officers with him. And he makes a joke that he's like, why are the police here? When did the police get interested in people's drains issues?
Yeah, I remember this.
Yes, yeah. So so the main detective we find out is Detective Chief Inspector, so DCI is what they call him over there. DCI Peter J. So he's the main detective on this, and he'll be the one that is the main detective throughout this whole case. And he actually gets very close with Dennis during this whole thing. So he meets him there, and he asks him if he can come upstairs to his flat and talk to him a bit about the blockage, and obviously what was found in the blockage. Yeah, which they don't tell him until later. So they go upstairs.
Now, can I talk about, because I don't know. Obviously, again, we did our own separate research.
Yeah.
I remember when they were talking about the flesh that they found and that they could identify that it was human remains. And I kind of brought up that they brought, or they, I guess, identified the hair on the flesh as human remains.
Okay.
So I listened to or heard that the type of hair on the flesh, whether it's your arm hair, your neck hair, or your scalp, I guess, can identify what part of the body that hair is on.
Right.
So, you doing okay there?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, she's
not in it.
Okay,
sorry. I keep leaning back.
Welcome in.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Welcome to The Shot.
Thank you.
Everybody watching on YouTube.
Hi.
This is Chris Gian.
Oh, hey guys. Here's my face. Thank you.
They were able to identify that it was neck hair on the flesh.
Okay, but that's super creepy.
So this was a documentary that I watched.
Ew.
That was the actual detectives talking about their experience in this, and they said that the neck hair gave clues that it was neck hair or that it was neck flesh, and that there was ligature marks.
Okay, so that I remember. Okay, so that was in the notes, but it was never accompanied with the hair facts, which is
so they
really gross.
They used the neck hair to realize that it was neck flesh, and then the ligature marks made them basically recognize that, hey, this is somebody that's been murdered.
Right, yeah, this is
choked
not...
to death. Yeah.
Which, I don't know what other conclusion they would come to. It's
with
not like a
flesh.
suicide in the tank. I don't know.
Just chopping off my own leg.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Hours.
So...
Okay, continue.
No, that's okay. So, yeah, so they asked him if they could come ask him some more questions, and so they go up to his flat. And this whole time, he's super, like, hunky-dory. Like, yeah, sure, come on up. Blah, blah, blah. So they get up there. And immediately, they're hit with the unmistakable stench of death and decomp. And, of course, Nilsen, it just is not phasing him at all. I mean, he's been probably living in this for quite some time. He's so immune to it. Yeah, who knows? So they get in there and... they immediately are like, we're not even gonna, like, the pleasantries are over. Like, this is our guy. This is where the source is coming from. Obviously. Yeah. Knock them on their ass. Yeah. So they said they let him know. I don't even think they sat down. They were just like, did you know that there was human remains found in your tank? And when he said, where is it? He goes, good grief, how awful. As if reading from a script. Yes. Anyway, so they asked him, and like I said, he did the super fake, good grief, how awful. And
or genuine. I mean, we don't actually know.
Who knows?
But
yeah, I mean, it is awful. That's genuine. But so DCIJ called him out and was basically like, cut the shit. Like, and he goes, where's the rest of the body? And so many sources will just say how quickly Dennis Nilsen just caved in right away. Yeah. He was like, I'm not even going to try and fake this. And so without even like skipping a beat, he just said, it's in my wardrobe. So like a dresser, a closet dresser. Yeah. So some sources say that they opened the wardrobe to verify. Some sources say that they went near the wardrobe and it stunk so bad that they didn't even need to open it to know that something was in there. And obviously when they first came in there and the smell was so bad, I mean, that was probably their first.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That was probably their first verification. They're like, that was all they needed. So they put him under arrest and they took him in, and in the cop ride over, they asked him, they were like, oh yeah, how many? And he said,
wait what, because this is
You're
like the
so
part
funny.
This is the part that I really like, because the detective asking this was like, how many?
Yeah.
He goes, is it 1 or 2?
Yeah.
And then what does he say back?
He says about 15 or 16. Which, I know, which we find out later is kind of a rough guess, but it's pretty close to that. Yeah. But he was also asked where the rest of the body was found that they had found pieces of in the sewer system. So he, like I said, when he was first initially confronted with this, calmly responded. He knew it was up. He knew there was, he's done for.
You got me.
Yeah, so
he's Scottish, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
For all you Scottish listeners.
That we're getting into that, too. So, yeah, it's okay.
Sorry.
It's all good. It's okay, yeah. Right. So he said, same thing. He goes, it's in my dresser. There's more. There's also more in my desk and under the cabinet. And he kind of just started like listing where all these body parts were. Wow. So, yeah. So when he was at the station, there was cops back at his house finding the rest of the body parts that he didn't have time to dispose of yet. Gotcha. Okay. So what they had found in the sewer was just parts of what he hadn't finished yet. So I guess before we kind of get into like all the victims and everything like that, and maybe just kind of to touch on him a little bit. So when Dennis Nilsen was arrested, he was 37 years old, and he's originally from Scotland, and he had joined the army at a pretty young age, where he got really good at cooking, honed his culinary skills, and he eventually settled in London, where this kind of all started. So something that you had mentioned earlier came out during the investigation was that he was actually a police officer for a little bit of time.
Okay, so that's what the whole civil servant type thing was. It's like a...
That's what they call it over there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So another thing that gets brought up, and this ties into the being a police officer thing, is his sexual orientation, which normally has nothing to do with anything. But in this case, during all the interrogation and his trial and everything, and in his book, he was asked so many times if he was gay. And we also have to keep in mind this is the 70s and early 80s, and this is something that people weren't super comfortable with yet.
If I remember, it became legal while he was alive.
Which is so weird that it was ever illegal. It's just really weird to think of something like that.
Not legal to be married, but legal to be...
Exactly. Yeah. You could get charged with something if you were caught with a guy or something. It's super weird. So... because a lot of his victims ended up being young men. I mean, all of them were men, but some of them, they kind of ranged in ages. He was asked multiple times if he was gay, and he never really verified if he was. Okay. Even though all of his victims were men, not all of them were gay. Right. So you don't really find out. I mean, I guess we'll never know what the conversations were that he had before he got them home, or... some of them were, though. And so they kind of were wondering if, kind of like they do in cases today, what was his target type? Was he targeting gay men, or was it just men in general?
Like an MO, I guess. Yeah. For what he chooses as his victims.
Yeah. So something else that comes up or something that you should keep in mind, I guess, is that this is all taking place in the 70s and early 80s in London. And during this time, people were flocking from all over to London. It was huge. Yep. And there was a lot of people, kind of like New York and LA, where they're looking for success and they're hoping to hit it big. And as we know and as we've heard so many times, these cities are not always kind to people in return. So, you know, you hear about people, I'm going to be an actress. And then they go to LA and they end up like working at Denny's, which there's nothing wrong with that either, but it just doesn't turn out the way you think it's going to turn out. So
to each their own.
Yeah. So some people go there with $10, $20, sometimes nothing, and they just hope to get lucky, and they end up sleeping on the street. So during this time, there was a huge wave of homeless people and a huge wave of homeless men. And when you have that combo, the desperation and homelessness in that combo, they're hungry, they're tired, they have nowhere to sleep. And that's where you kind of find a victim pool. And that's kind of where Dennis Nilsen kind of thrived, was people that were desperate. And not all of them, you'll find out, in his victims were like that, but a majority of them were.
Okay.
All right. So kind of going back to his whole sexuality thing, when they found out he was a police officer at one point, I mean, this was huge. When he was caught, they were like, coming from the police officers who were investigating this, they were like, when the press finds out that this was a police officer, we are so screwed that we didn't even know, and he was working for us. So they asked him why he had left, like, why aren't you still a cop? And he said that he left due to like homophobic slander and homophobia in the police force. And people found out that he might have been gay or somewhat, and they just treated him terribly, and that's when he left. That's kind of where that comes from. So then after that, I think he was job hopping for a little bit, and then that's where he ended up at this job center.
Which kind of makes sense, because when you, I mean, not so much modern day, but I think even still a little bit modern day, when you think of the police force, you think of these big manly men that are there to save the day, and, you know, supposed to serve and protect. And if one of them, even though, you know, even if you are a big manly man and you come out as gay, it's going to be something that people unfortunately still look down upon and think you're lesser of a person. So I could just imagine back in, you know, like you said, the late 70s, early 80s, that if you're a police officer that comes out, or not really comes out, but gets discovered as
because I don't think any of it was coming out back then. It was so dangerous.
Definitely not. But if you get caught being with a man, I could just imagine the ridicule, I guess, or even just like the shame you would be forced to feel just because of that alone. So I can't blame him for not wanting to be a part of that.
Right. And he's already kind of a loner, so he probably already feels super alone. So, so like I said, there's a lot of young men kind of looking for a place to sleep, food, and as we talked about, Nilsen was in the Army and was a chef, and so one of the things that he kind of used was, I can cook you food. I can, you know, and
to
also...
kind of entice them.
Right. And also alcohol. Alcohol was another thing. It was...
Still is.
It still kind of is a lure. Come back to my place. But in this case, it was something he used all the time. That was one... I mean, 90% of his victims he met at pubs. And I still don't know if this was on purpose or not, or if pubs, bars, places like that are just a place where you just find people down on their luck, or maybe people are celebrating something, or, I mean, it just kind of draws out. Some people are just there on a lunch break. I don't know. And it kind of gives you kind of like a plethora of victims. You can kind of scope people out. Okay. So kind of I guess we can get into his victims now. So there's, I mean, like I said, there's only 8 have been confirmed to this day. I mean, there's so many websites and these videos and stuff that say where Dennis is like adamant that there's only 12 people he killed. And when at the beginning, if you can remember, he had said 15 or 16
in the cop car.
Yes, yeah. So at the end, and I think they've just been chasing this 15 or 16 number this whole time. Okay. So when they only can find 12 or verify 12 counts, they can only actually solidify 8 of those 12. So they're like, where are these 3 or 4, right? From the 12 to the 15 or 16, there's those 3 or 4. They're like, where in the world are those ones? So Dennis, you'll find out later, Dennis Nilsen says that he like fabricated them. I don't know why, because he's very truthful about a lot of them. Yeah, exactly. So it seems like there's a lot more. But I was telling Riley earlier that I didn't feel when we were talking about what to touch on, I didn't feel it was okay to kind of like use this as like, this is super gross, because you'll find out how gross it is later, like how gross and crazy this case is, and then like not talk about these people that much, because there's only 8 of them, and I'm not going to go too much into detail because quite frankly there's not a lot of detail on these people, which is super sad, because some of them are really young.
The fact that they could identify these people at all.
Yeah, it took a lot of freaking work. Like, this was a really long investigation, and I think even to this day they're still trying to figure out who some of these people are. So what I didn't tell you was, before this Cranley Gardens, he lived on Melrose Avenue. And this was an apartment that he had before the one that he was caught at with the septic tank. And the main difference is the one he was caught at was on the 3rd story. So this other one on Melrose was a ground level apartment, which in the back also had a garden that was used for everybody. So it wasn't just his garden, but it was still... There's way more convenience. I mean, as you know, on a ground level apartment for moving stuff, it's just a lot easier. Yeah. Granted, you have people above you that can be noisy, but it is a lot easier to have a ground level one. So that's the main difference. So a lot of these murders had taken place at this apartment. So there's
the first one, Melrose.
Yes, okay. At Melrose. That's right. Yeah. So 195 Melrose Avenue. So he fully took advantage of the fact that this was a much more convenient flat to be at. So, like I said, we don't know too much about these people, but we do know through the hard work of these people and the limited amount of information that he can recall, because he knew so much more about what happened to them and not so much all these names.
Yeah, I mean, he was the only one who had any information.
Yeah, it was like pulling teeth. I mean, they were like, can you give us anything? And he's like, oh, I think he had blue eyes, and it was really hard. So the fact that they even found 8 is amazing. Yep. So on December 30th, 1978, Nilsen's first victim, Stephen Holmes, accompanied him back to his flat. They had once again met at a pub. Like I said, that was like his main thing. And Stephen had attempted to purchase alcohol, but Stephen was only 14, which blows my mind. He was a child, so young. But this is also the laws in the UK for drinking are, you can be a lot younger. Yeah. So 14 to us is crazy, but if the age over there is 17 or 18, it's not that far off, but still. And, we hear that people in other countries tend to start drinking a little bit younger. You just hear about that sometimes. It's just a little bit more normalized over there. So he had attempted to purchase alcohol, and Nilsen was there when he got turned down. So once again, Nilsen saw an opportunity. So he promised him alcohol. He's like, hey, there's alcohol back at my house. We find out later that Nilsen thought that he was, Stephen Holmes was probably about 17 or 18. So whether or not that's the truth, I don't know, but he might have looked older. So maybe that's kind of what it is. I don't know if he really would have stopped him if he knew he was 14. Yeah. I'm not quite sure. But so before we get too far into this is something that you're going to notice, so I don't want to have to repeat it every time. But Nilsen had this weird thing of music and alcohol. So when he would listen to music, he was really into music. When he would listen to like certain albums and kind of just music in general, but there was certain albums that triggered it, the combo of being drunk and music, it was like this weird thing where he was quoted in saying like it takes him somewhere else. And he's not who he, right. So this is another thing when I talk about like he kind of had like an MO, it wasn't the same every time, it wasn't concrete, but something along with meeting people in pubs, another constant was alcohol and music. So he would invite people back to drink. Sometimes they listen to music, sometimes they just listen to music. But when the combo happened, it was like this weird blackout thing where he like became like crazy and something snapped. Wow. So in this case, that's what happened. So we invited him over to listen to music. They had started drinking, and they had both passed out after. And in the morning, Nilsen had woken up to find Stephen laying next to him. So let me jump back really quick. Nilsen had a partner. So this kind of goes back to the whole sexual orientation thing.
Okay. But partner like boyfriend or...
Right.
Okay.
But when he was questioned later, he told the police officers that it was never sexual, but he was with a man. So I don't know how you guys want to label that. I'm not sure, but he was with a man for a period of time. And there's these old home videos, I'm sure you can find it if you look it up, where they bought a camcorder together, and there's all these like old films where they're, you know, out in the garden or they're in the kitchen or something. Yeah, your old
home videos.
Yeah, and I think you were saying that you had seen some of them or something.
I saw a couple of them. Yeah. The one that because we talk about how Dennis Nilsen is kind of like a control freak a little bit.
Yeah.
Or seemingly, like as the story progresses, it feels like he wants to be in control of everything.
Yeah, and it almost comes down to this split personality kind of thing where you have this meek man that all of his tenants know him as, and people at work, and when you see him, I mean, we'll put pictures up on like Instagram and stuff, but if you even just go Google him, he is a very timid looking, like mousy looking man. And yeah, I mean, he's tall-ish, but he's very skinny. He's got kind of wispy hair, glasses. He kind of looks like a mouse. Like he's just not threatening at all. Okay, so like we were saying, in the home videos that were found later, you see kind of a, how do I say this, like a different side of him. Mm-hmm. So when the police are doing this investigation, they're talking to people that he knows. They're all getting this like shy, timid kind of view. And then they find this video of him later, and it shows a different side where he's with his old partner. And this will all tie in, I promise. But they show him an unedited version of Dennis Nilsen.
Who he is.
Exactly. Who he really is, quote unquote, behind the scenes. Yep. Because this is a home movie, and it shows him being controlling and snapping at his partner. And when his partner is the one filming, you can see him freak out about small things, about, no, you're not filming it the right way, or why are you fucking up, and like just like really like narcissistic.
The clip I saw was him. It was like laying down. He was like, why are you panning this way? Don't fucking pan while I'm I don't know if he didn't want him to record him at all, but it was absurd.
So you kind of get this different view. So we find out that this partner, and forgive me for not having the name of this man, but they were together for quite some time, and they even got a dog together, and her name is Bleep, and she's a collie, and that'll come in later. But they had adopted this dog together, and then after years of abuse that this man had suffered from Nilsen, and verbal, he was never physically abusive, because this man was interviewed later after all this kind of went down, and he was like, no, he never laid a hand on me. So it must have just been emotional, mental abuse, and he left. And this kind of where this whole thing stems from, where Nilsen isn't good with people leaving. He's not good with abandonment. He has a fear of it, and it comes out in his controlling ways, just like you were saying. Yeah.
It wasn't even like he describes it, not sexual in nature, even though it seems like he's obviously gay, and they probably did things sexually together, but he said it was more of, I think, like any real
he's attracted
relationship.
To male company. I think that's kind of what it is.
Exactly. That's kind of where I was getting towards, was it was more of the company that he had with his partner, and his fear of once he lost that with his first partner, it really...
Exactly. Who else is going to leave me?
Yeah.
Which is what happens when he wakes up the night after meeting Steven. And like I said, Steven's 14 years old, which, once again, he doesn't find out till later, I know. And I'm not taking that away from anything. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not like, well, Nilsen didn't know. I mean, he obviously, some bad stuff happened. So they say that when this first victim happened, which, I mean, it's really hard to believe that there was nobody else before this, that it just happened one day. But this is the first one they can at least verify that happened. So when he woke up and he was laying there, they say that he was so scared he was going to leave him, that he didn't want him to go. So in his warped up mind, he decided he needed to stay, and the only way he would stay is if he killed him. So he strangled him. And something you'll also hear so many times over and over again is that his method of strangulation was a necktie, and which we had so many neckties confiscated after this, just to kind of see what DNA was on stuff and if they could tie it to anything. But so another thing he did, a combo that he did, like kind of like music and alcohol, another combo that he did was strangulation and drowning. So he would strangle somebody, and then whether he got tired or he found out that maybe he finished strangling them and then they were like, oh my God, he's not actually dead, he would then drown them. So he had like a bucket of water, or he would do it in, another one was in the kitchen sink or in the bathtub. So I don't want to say that it's not messy, but that's like another, like, it's not stabbing, it's not messy.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, so I don't know psychology wise what that means, because some people kind of argue a hands-off thing, right? Like if somebody kills somebody with a gun,
so
it's
almost
hands-off. Hands-on is more intimate.
Yeah,
but you find out that he does some gross stuff later, but like he doesn't kill anybody like to me a knife is like final.
Yeah, and that is one of the things where when you talk about, there's certain cases I'm sure we'll discuss in the future, but you can tell when something's like a revenge murder because of how violent it is.
Yeah.
Versus, and usually they'll say, you know, if there is like 27 stab wounds in somebody, it's somebody that probably knows that person, and there's a reason that or there's a lot of obviously psychology that goes into it, but almost like you're saying, like a hands-off approach where when he's killing this guy, and I never actually thought about this before this, but when he's killing this guy, it's not him killing him for something he doesn't like about Steven, or doesn't
almost the opposite. He likes him so much. He wants
him to stay so much, and so that his reasoning is like it's not so violent that it's like I got to get rid of this guy, I hate him. It's more like I want you here forever.
Yeah.
And I don't leave me. And
so which makes sense, the whole killing for company thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something that I think psychologists and psychiatrists, this whole thing, kind of going back to the method of killing is also what you do after the killing. So sometimes they can be kind of related, sometimes not. But in this case, it's argued whether or not Dennis Nilsen was really into necrophilia, because he never, as honest as he was about so much stuff in his confessions and in his interviews, interrogations, all that stuff, was he said he never did anything. There was no
I think the word I was gonna say, the word he uses is penetration.
Yeah, which I don't want to get too graphic.
I never penetrated to the lab.
Okay. So I don't want to get too graphic, because especially in this case, this is a child. Like, I don't want to get too graphic. But a lot of these other guys are grown-ups, and he did say, he's like, I've never done anything, but he was quoted so much saying that he found the male body beautiful, and there was something about a deceased male body that really aroused him, and he really found like artwork like beautiful. And we'll never be able to understand this, thank you God, but that's why he kept these for so long. So he kept Steven for a little bit of time
after he killed him.
After he killed them, because he found him beautiful. So it wasn't like, oh my God, he's dead and this is disgusting.
I gotta get rid of him.
It's almost like the appeal went up after. So not only did he have this person that he could hang out with, dead or alive.
Leave him.
Yeah, dead or alive. It now was more physically appealing to him too. So, it can only last so long, as we know, because decomp and everything.
Exactly.
But I don't really know if he really thought that through when this first happened. It doesn't sound like he really had a game plan going into this. But, so he actually ended up keeping Steven's body for 8 months.
Jeez.
Yeah. So you can imagine how much decomp happens.
Yeah, man, I think we'll probably learn and be more familiar as we cover more cases about the phases of decomposition.
Yeah.
And how actually disgusting an 8-month body could be.
Yeah.
But obviously when someone's dead from the beginning, I'm thinking that's disgusting.
Yeah.
But it makes me, I wonder kind of, what kind of state was his body in, where he was like, okay, I should probably get rid of this guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think he was just trying to probably hold on as long as he could.
Yeah.
And something about this garden flat apartment at Melrose was that it had more storage. So it had a lot of storage under the bathtub, which if you can kind of imagine, there's like these little cupboards, and the bathtub kind of sits on top of it. I don't know if you can really imagine that. But then also there's, I don't know if this is like a UK thing or if there is anything here. I haven't seen anything here in the US where there's floorboard storage. I don't know where, you can kind of open it up and there's like places to put stuff. I've never seen that, at least. But then also keep in mind that this is the apartment that had the garden out back. So he kind of had more opportunity. I don't know if he set out with this on purpose, but after spending some time with Stephen's naked dead body, most of his victims ended up sticking around for at least a couple days outside of storage, and then they would kind of start to stiffen as they would within hours, I believe, rigor mortis, and then they would put them in, or he would put them under the floorboards, where, as you can imagine, things started to smell. I mean, he did take some kind of precautions as far as like plastic bags, things like that. He was known to put deodorants. I don't know what that means, but it said deodorants in the notes, so I'm not sure what their version of that over there is.
Deodorant is.
I don't know if it's some kind of powder or something.
Like
right,
that.
I'm not sure, but he was known to like put them down with the bodies and wrap them up, and probably something like incense,
So just to cover it up, that
exactly
clearly is not going to be doing the job because it's a dead body.
Yeah, exactly, So in between some of these victims, he had some almost victims, so some attempted murders that I think he was only ever charged for one attempted murder, but there was some that they couldn't charge because a lot of these victims didn't press charges, whether they were embarrassed because they were gay and they were talking about it, or whether or not the police didn't believe them. There was multiple reasons why people came forward or didn't come forward, and either were not believed or were too scared because they weren't going to be believed. But he had another one, after Stephen Holmes. He was a young student visiting from Hong Kong named Andrew Ho, and once again had met at a pub, and at least according to Nilsen, had told Ho that they would go back to his place to have sex. So it ended up escalating, and he tried to strangle him, and of course, I'm not quite sure, I don't want to be presumptuous, but I don't know if language had a part in this because he was from Hong Kong, I'm not sure, but it said that he decided not to press charges. Could be embarrassment, could be he didn't know how to communicate, I'm not sure. So after that, his second actual victim was a few months after this. So I'm sure after probably almost getting caught and having the police, he was like, probably took a little bit of a break.
Yeah, like, oh,
exactly.
Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Well,
so
not quite away.
Exactly.
Right away.
So Nilsen met 23-year-old Kenneth Ockenden, which this ended up being the biggest victim out of, like, the most sensationalized, because he came from like a prominent family, and this was not a usual suspect. He wasn't gay, he had a girlfriend, and he wasn't homeless, he was traveling, his family came from money, and they weren't actually able to like link him for sure for quite some time. So the main detective, DCI Peter J., was actually got in trouble for even bringing this up as a potential suspect. When he went and visited Nilsen in prison, Nilsen was like, yeah, I think I killed that Kenneth Ockenden kid. And so far, he hadn't lied. So the DCI Peter J. was like, you know what? I think you killed this Kenneth Ockenden kid. There was so much publicity around this kid being missing.
Wow.
So they were like, so his main... I don't know what you'd call it, the main chief of the police department was like, why are you even bringing this kid up? Like, this kid doesn't match the victim profile. Like, we don't even know. Why would you even say that? So he actually took a lot of time trying to connect him to it, because he just had a feeling that Nilsen was telling the truth about this one kid. So Kenneth was actually, like I said, 23. He was traveling from Canada, and he was visiting relatives that he had in England. And when they met at a pub, of course, Nilsen had offered to show Kenneth around and do the usual like touristy things, and Kenneth accepted. A lot of sources say he was like super nice and friendly, so he probably just believed this guy was really nice. And so they kind of did all the touristy things that day, and then on the way back, Nilsen was like, hey, do you want to go drink at my place? Which we all know where this is going. So when they went to the local like alcohol store or whatever, Kenneth insisted on paying for it. Like I said, he came from money, so I'm sure Nilsen was like, heck yeah. So then, they bought a bunch of alcohol, went back to his place, and once again, this is another example of mixing alcohol and music. And this is another one where he had said, yeah, you can come listen to music. I have some great records. And when Kenneth had the headphones on, a lot like these, he would sit there in the chair, and Nilsen came up behind him and strangled him with the headphone cord.
Okay, so that's I remember this
one?
victim.
Yeah.
That he used the headphone cord.
So this happened a few times, but this was the first one.
Okay.
So he probably was like, "Oh, this works."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Right. Exactly. So
they're distracted and
yes, they can't hear
convenient.
anything. Exactly. Yeah. So after he had ended up strangling Kenneth, he kept the body, of course, like he usually does. And the next day, he actually went and purchased a camera where he took a bunch of pictures of Kenneth's naked body. So like I said before, he found the male body, especially deceased, extremely beautiful. So that's when he was like, you need to take all these pictures. And after he had enough of that, and Kenneth's body was eventually obviously starting to show signs of decomp, he had to get rid of him. So that's when he, of course, put him under the floorboard like the others.
Fingers.
So something else that was brought up in this specific case was that he would take Kenneth's body, which you'll find he'll do this with a few victims. He'll take his body out from the floorboard. So it wasn't like a one and done thing, especially if what was said that if certain bodies were taking longer to decompose and they were still kind of showing signs of looking like a person, like not falling apart quite yet, he would take them out multiple times and pose them, whether it was on his bed, take pictures, or most of the time, and this is going to sound super creepy, but it's also very sad, is he would put them in chairs or on the couch and talk to them. And like what
have conversations.
Yeah, exactly. And like the book title, Killing for Company, he had this weird fear of abandonment. He was a loner. He wanted these people to stay with him. And something he had said was when these bodies were in the chair, obviously dead, he would think, man, if they were alive right now, I wonder what we'd be talking about. Weird. It's just so weird to be looking at a dead person. I mean, I can't imagine that they're not showing some signs of decomp, but they're enough together that he's like, well, they still kind of look like a person. And you're thinking like, well, I wonder what we'd be talking about right now if they weren't dead. So he did this multiple times until they actually started to fall apart. Yeah,
that is a question that somebody like, hey, if you could have dinner with any dead person right now, like, who would it be? Like George Washington, or Abraham Lincoln, or somebody like that.
Yeah.
LeBron James, I don't know.
Yeah, or Elvis.
And he's like, and he's got, well, you think Elvis is dead.
Oh my God, anyway.
Do we need to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tupac?
Anyways.
Okay.
But this guy is like, man,
actually
I wonder
dead.
I wonder if I don't know what we would talk about if he was here. And he's
But he is there.
But he's dead.
Yeah.
That is.
Isn't it crazy?
I
know.
Gives me like.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Super weird.
Goosebumps.
Yeah, like I said, messed up, but also weirdly sad. Not like in a I feel bad for you kind of way, but like, wow, that's really how far you had to take it to feel like you weren't alone.
Yeah. I mean, that gives us a glimpse into like.
Yeah.
How fucked up he was. And not just for what he was doing, but like. It doesn't bother him, I guess. Yeah. He's more like, I wonder what would be.
Exactly.
Because that's what is he.
And maybe that
doing
ties back to the grandpa, right? After you've seen like your first deceased person, you know, maybe you kind of lose that attachment. If it's not explained to you properly, you're like, well, dead people don't really,
you're
there's
so
not really an attachment.
With it right away.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. So his third victim, and I'm not going to spend too long on all of them, but I do want to give like enough credit to these people. But his third victim, he met on May 17th. 1980. His name was Martin Duffy, and he was only 16 years old. And he was a catering student hitchhiking from London, and his parents didn't know that he had left. He had been caught evading the train fare and was kicked off in London, so he was forced to sleep on the streets for like 3 or 4 nights. And that's when he came across Dennis Nilsen, and where he was offered food, place to sleep, and we've talked about this as very specific victim type. And that night after he had fallen asleep, Dennis had fashioned, not a noose, but ligature. But it was from like a piece of like fabric from like the couch or something. It's almost like Velcro, like a piece of Velcro or something. Right. He just had made it. So it wasn't a necktie this time or the headphone cord. And
do they know if that was because he
like didn't have it or something.
Didn't have a
I'm
necktie,
not sure.
or
Maybe he was trying out a new thing. I don't know.
I was gonna say something that like if he
might
ever
work
got
better,
caught, couldn't.
Or yeah, that too. Yeah. So once he was strangled, this is the combo I was talking about where he thought he might have been dead and he wasn't dead. Still a little bit of life left, and this is when he drowned him in the kitchen sink. And afterwards, when he knew for sure he was dead, he had bathed with the body and kept the body out for a few days, just like Kenneth Ockenden, and did the usual propping him up, talking to him, and then he did things with the body. Like I said, necrophilia, it's a very like specific, like you actually have intercourse, right? Like with the body. Like is, he just said that he did things with it. So whether he touched himself, whatever it is, I don't want to get too much into that kind of stuff. Yeah, but like he was very specific that he didn't do things to the body like that.
Yeah, if you get aroused by a dead body, and sexually are attracted to dead bodies, but you never do anything to the body. I mean, I don't know where that line is on it.
Yeah, me too. Right. I don't know what like a psychiatrist. I'm not sure, but this was. Only reason I'm bringing it up is because that specific part was brought up so much, because the psychiatrist that went over him in trial, and they really vetted him on this, because that is something to bring up for sure, because that's a whole other charge to bring against someone.
As you mentioned a couple times, the killing for comfort, is that what you...
Yeah. Killing for company. For company. Yeah.
Okay, Killing for Company. That's the book that this author, right?
Brian Masters, yeah.
So Brian Masters, he... was in like constant contact with
he visited him for years, even after the book was published, and he visited him for like 10 years after he was sentenced.
So kind of going back to what we talked about from the beginning, where Dennis Nilsen, when you watch his old home videos, he has a control freak type attitude. If he doesn't want people thinking that he is what he said, penetrating these bodies or doing things physically with these bodies, just being aroused by them. Yeah. That's probably one of the things that is going to be a constant or a point of emphasis. He doesn't want people to think that he's having sex with dead bodies, because he doesn't think he is. Yeah. And I'm sure, people would love to sensationalize hey, this guy has sex with dead bodies, and
not only that, but it's a combo of male on male, and like I said back then, that was huge. Like, you're not allowed to talk about it, you're not allowed to even do it, not anything. So then on top of that, the whole necrophilia thing, So after the body was showing signs of decomp and just beyond the point that he could even do anything with it or to it, he was like, okay, you're under the floorboards, just like the rest. So after Duffy, Nilsen kicked up his frequency and killed another 5 victims before the end of 1980. So he was trying to get his fix, and he attempted to murder another one. 26-year-old William Sutherland was the only other one identified out of these men during this time. So this is where the whole unidentified, there's a huge chunk. So there's like 4 or 5 of these that they don't know that came from just a specific time. So he doesn't even remember. I don't know whether he blacked out during this time and he was just killing a bunch of people. Who knows what he was going through at the time? I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Because there seems to be a pattern and frequency with the others.
The Omelet Boy listed under?
So that one is down here. Yeah, somewhere. Yeah.
So that kind of gives a clue. So he didn't really get to know these people for who they are,
because that was in one of the shows too that they showed, was that they were like, how did you not know any of their names? Not one point did you. And they're like, well, we didn't really talk, we talked about music and other things.
A lot of it was the way they identified him, or these victims were like nicknames, or he would try to, again, he's the only one that knows
like blue eyes or from a certain area,
and so they have to use whatever information he can remember and choose to give them.
Which was super frustrating for police, obviously, because they're trying to put names to these people. But it makes sense, because I mean, I've gone out before with my sister and stuff, whatever, and we're talking to people at the bar, and super nice chicks or whatever, like, yeah, we did this, and I'm from here, and then I leave, and I'm like, I don't even know what their name is. Like, I think they said it once, I don't even know.
You're like, I told her I would
Granted,
follow her on Instagram.
Granted, True Crime Banter. Granted,
Bingo.
Granted. Hold on. In this case, I think they're expecting a little bit more because he killed them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, you would think that there's a reason. Yeah.
Exactly, to us. How could you not remember the name of somebody you killed? But to him, it's like, just another Thursday, you know? So, like, why would I remember
that was something I thought about, too, was, man, how do you not know who you killed or have not the most vivid memory of what was happening?
Yeah.
And he did have a lot of memories of the actual things he did to the people, but at the same time, you're talking over a dozen people.
Yeah.
So
potentially
for us, for us, we're thinking, man, if I ever kill somebody I know, I would probably never forget every detail about it.
Right.
But he's like,
but we're not
Nilsen.
Nilsen.
Yeah, so
exactly.
One of those guys. I can't remember.
So as you can imagine, having this many people and body parts under your floorboards, eventually you have to do something about it. I mean, obviously the smell doesn't bother him because we found that out later, that he was just living in this decomp smell, but at some point somebody's going to smell it. So in late 1980, Nilsen decided he needed to get rid of them, and where better than the garden that he has right outside back. And he decided he's going to do this big fire to get rid of everything. And in order to mask the smell, he used like rubbish, garbage, old tires.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember rubber tires.
Mm-hmm. Things that obviously smell terrible when you burn them. But something else that is repeated so many times is when he did this, not all of his victims were dismembered when they were killed. They were just put under the floorboards. So by the time that he dragged them up, there was maggots and flies and insects collecting in these bodies. And you can only imagine, in order to face that, you probably can't be sober, which is exactly what he did. He would get blinding drunk anytime he did this. So every, I don't know, maybe year, we found out he kept it already for 8 months. So at least every 8 months, sometimes he would do it sooner. He would get insanely drunk, and that's how he was able to face what he did.
It's almost shocking that for how drunk he would have to get to do this, that he didn't like mess up,
right, or cut himself doing it or something.
Exactly.
He's a vet. I mean, he's been doing it. So he would dismember the bodies, and then that's when he would put them outside in the back.
Speaking of being a vet and dismembering bodies, that was like when you think about him being in the army as like a chef or working in the kitchen, that's where he had learned how to, I guess, properly dismember animals, right? You know, and so those are skills that he then decided, you know what?
I mean, this is assuming he's not like going to like Le Cordon Bleu, right? Like he's not like going to like.
It's a type of ranch.
No, it's like a school. I'm pretty sure.
If
it's not, we're editing that out. But I'm pretty sure I used to see that online or on the TV.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Like those older, like yeah, I know.
Okay. Yeah, super old, like on like when I'd stay home and watch like the Maury Show or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so I mean that's also assuming that they like taught him how to like cut a pig apart, not just like put parsley on stuff, exactly. Like not like fancy. Right. Yeah. So anyway, he would, like I said, get blinding drunk, put them in this giant tub out back. Put any other garbage that's out there too, tires, all that kind of stuff. And part of his disposal process was removing the organs from these victims, and whether or not he disposed them in his trash or the community trash, but it was like kind of his way of cleaning up in between. So like things that he thought might leave like a smell, like organs, he would clean them out.
Get rid of that
exactly.
First. Okay.
So, which is just, I can't even imagine finding like intestines in the apartment garbage outside, but you know. So at this apartment at Melrose, his final victim would be 23-year-old by the name of Malcolm Barlow, who Nilsen discovered outside. And this is such a sad and bizarre one because he almost got away. And this was one of those weird circumstances where Malcolm had epilepsy. So Nilsen was leaving one day and he found this young boy slumped outside of his apartment. And he kind of was like, hey, are you okay? And this kid was like, yeah, the pills that they have me on for this epilepsy, they make my legs really weak, so it's really hard for me to walk. So sometimes I just kind of like have to lay down and sleep for a little bit and pass out. And it wasn't really mentioned if he was like a homeless youth or not, but probably, because, you know, you would think if you know these meds make you weak, you'd try to take them at home or something, you know? So So anyway, so he was like, so Nilsen, this was one of those weird opportunities where Nilsen was like, maybe not opportunities, but a weird instance where he was like actually showing some humanity. And he's like, you don't look so good. You should probably like go to the hospital. And this kid was like, no, I'm okay. And so Nilsen actually ended up calling him an ambulance. And so he actually went in the ambulance to the hospital. And then Nilsen just went on with his day.
Wow.
And then the next day, when he was out of hospital, Malcolm Barlow came back to say thank you. And then that's when Nilsen invited him in for a drink. And then that's when so of course you would have no idea.
Yeah.
But you come back to say thank you, to do the right thing, to say thank you.
Wow.
And then you end up becoming a victim. Yep.
Wow. Okay, so we're looking at like 5 to 8 victims in the first apartment.
Yeah, so he did like all of them there pretty much. So I think he had like 3 or 4 at the last one.
That makes sense because obviously when he moved into the second apartment, his only way of disposing them was the plumbing. Okay, all right, continue.
Yeah. So he was actually asked to vacate before he moved from Melrose. This is just like a little detail thing that he was actually asked to leave because the super was doing like not renovations, kind of renovations, like fixing up some stuff. And of course he's like, oh, like, you know, I can't leave this place. There's some shit here. So he was actually offered like, it said £1,000. I don't know how much that would be in like US dollars at that time and now, I'm not sure, but it's like £1,000.
I think they're pretty close.
£1,000 to vacate. So probably like to use for a hotel while he was trying to do something or whatever. But he was vacating the next night. So he knew that he was going to have to leave the next day for a little bit. So he spent that entire night cleaning, disposing, fire, the whole thing that he's been doing. So that was just like a little thing that it was like he's had a couple close calls and that was another one.
Yeah, that could be another one where if he had maybe one more body under the floorboards than he had, that he could have been caught because he couldn't get rid of it soon enough, you know? Wow.
Yeah. Jeez. So after that, he shortly moved into the one that he was caught at, so Cranley Gardens.
Okay, yeah.
So the first few months after he moved there, he's not used to this setup. He's at the top floor, there's no garden, and this apartment didn't have the same kind of storage space. There was no floorboard storage, there was nothing. So for the first few months there was no activity. I mean, he was just had people over, which they said that he had like a normal amount of guests over, but he's also a loner. So I don't know if he had like a mail company over and was kind of in this weird space where I think he was like testing it out. Like if I was to do something, how would I do it? But then he was like, it wouldn't work. So he let them go. I don't know because he wasn't very social, but it said he had company coming over, but he would let them leave. So I'm not sure. Maybe he just made a bunch of friends at this job out of nowhere. I don't freaking know. But anyway, so after he moved there and he was like, this place isn't going to work for all this stuff, then he had another boy come over. And then I think this is when they kind of started feeling it out. So this 19-year-old boy's name was Paul Nobbs, but he escaped. So this is another one that he just left. There was no charges pressed. There was no cops called over. Just another probably young boy who was embarrassed that he went to this guy's house and didn't want to tell anybody. So after he was like, okay, I didn't get in trouble for that one. So now it's March 1982, and Nilsen meets a 23-year-old named John Howlett, of course, at a pub again. The same ruse of continuing drinking and promising of more alcohol, and Howlett eventually became tired and wandered into Nilsen's bedroom to pass out. Nilsen said he sat on the edge of the bed and drank a little more. And in case you guys didn't know, his drink of choice was rum and coke. So he's drinking on the edge of the bed, staring at this passed out John Howlett, and decides, I'm going to kill him. That's just how it works. He's like, he's just going to die. So from the research, this was actually a pretty bad struggle, I guess. So he wasn't drunk enough to not struggle back. So he actually ended up putting up a really good fight, and he actually ended up strangling Dennis Nilsen back. So they're strangling each other at the same time. Exactly. So finally,
Kinky.
So after he's finally he's finally able to overpower him. So after he strangles him, he strangled for a really long time just to make sure he's dead.
So Dennis was finally able to overpower him.
Exactly.
Okay.
So he attempted to strangle him like like to the end so many times, but he kept coming back to life technically, like with these little baby shallow breaths. Okay. And so he was like, okay, this isn't working. So this is when he does his old ploy, I'm going to drown him. So that's what he does. And then he ends up keeping him in his room for a while. So then his next victim. So this is kind of a big one. Carl Stotter. He was 21 years old when he met Nilsen at a pub. Stotter had been drinking alone. He had just had a bad breakup, and Nilsen invited him back to his flat for more alcohol. So Carl actually was gay. So we find that out later, that he had just broken up with his boyfriend after this, and he was feeling probably down and out, vulnerable. And in my notes, it tells me this is a very important victim, because he actually ends up testifying later, because we find out that Carl actually survives. So when Stotter began to grow tired after drinking, Nilsen told him there was a sleeping bag he could use.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
So this is the one.
Okay.
So this is where we kind of see the smart, sneaky mind of Nilsen really working.
Yeah, where, almost the genius of him.
Yes, attempted genius.
It kind of reminds me of like a Dexter.
Yeah.
For people who haven't watched Dexter, he's somebody who is very quick on his feet when he's in a stressful situation.
Yeah, right.
With his words and his mind.
Exactly.
So, okay, I'll let you go ahead.
No, yeah. So he kind of sets up the evening for this plan. So when he's like, oh, you're getting tired? Yeah, I have a sleeping bag you can use. But the zipper is kind of loose, so you'll have to watch out because you can get kind of tangled up in it. So he's like, okay. So they go to bed. Everything's normal. And then not soon after drifting off, Stotter wakes up to him being strangled by Nilsen. And he remembers Nilsen loudly whispering in his ear, stay still. And Stotter then thought that Nilsen was trying to help him escape the zipper, because once again, this has now been planted in his mind. Yeah. The zipper was brought up. It must be the zipper. Yeah, exactly. So he remembers passing out again. And then Stotter briefly comes to, and he remembers hearing the sound of running water before his head is submerged in the water. So this is where we find, again, the strangling and the drowning thing. So Nilsen then thought he had killed Stotter, but his dog Bleep, the collie we talked about that he still had, kept licking Stotter's face. And that's when he realized that Stotter was still alive. So I don't know if this is some weird act of kindness or humanity, but he realized, you know what, he's alive. I'm going to try to help him out. I thought he was dead.
Yeah.
So he puts blankets around him, starts rubbing his limbs to try to warm him up, get his heartbeat going back up again. And he lets him rest there for days. He takes care of him. He nurses him back to health.
Acts like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So finally, when Stotter kind of comes to and is like able to even have a conversation and even know what's going on, he questions Dennis about this. He's like, what the hell happened to me? He goes, you were choking on the zipper. I told you, remember? And so he's like, okay, but there was like something about water. And he's like, yeah, you were in shock after the zipper. So I had to put you in the bathtub to wake you up.
Get you, gosh.
And so, yeah, exactly. So this is after days of letting him rest there, giving him food. And Nilsen just drives him to the train station.
Yeah,
and he just goes on his merry way.
If you imagine being... What was Colin?
Carl.
Mm-hmm. If you're Carl, and that's happening to you, and obviously, you know, initially you're thinking this guy's trying to kill me. And then he gives you a somewhat reasonable explanation for what was happening,
right.
and then
and he's
lets
taking
you
care
live
of you
and go. Like, why would you not think, okay, this guy's being honest, obviously, and especially if he's not feeling like he was. I guess molested in a way. Like if the only thing wrong with you is that you were basically choked out, you know.
Yeah.
Then why wouldn't you think, okay, this guy is actually trying to help me out?
Exactly. And he's brought up later, so you'll see about that. Yep, you'll see exactly what he's talking about when he's confused.
Oh,
exactly like that. Okay, Carl, gotcha, because he's brought up again. So, like I said, he escaped, quote unquote escaped. He dropped him off at the train station. He was on his merry way. And he was obviously traumatized from this whole thing, but kind of went on with his life. And then after that, his next victim, he meets 27-year-old Graham Allen in June of 1982 and got him back to his flat with the promise of food. And this is the omelet one. So he made Graham an omelet, and then he murdered him.
Okay.
Casual, omelet boy. So this is one where Nilsen admitted, when I was making him the omelet, I knew I was going to kill this kid. Yeah, so this was one of the ones. So after he killed him, he kept him in his bathtub for 3 days before he dismembered him in the kitchen. And then this is another example. He called into work and used that whole day to clean up and get rid of him. So this was his final victim, that we know of at least, was Stephen Sinclair, who was 20 years old when he met Nilsen and followed him back to his flat. Stephen passed out due to drugs and alcohol, where Nilsen strangled him with a necktie. After Stephen was passed out, Nilsen took off his clothes and found bandages wrapped around his wrist, indicating that Stephen had recently tried to take his own life. There was very deep gashes in his wrist.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, drugs and alcohol. I mean, this kid obviously didn't have a great life. And so, after bathing with the body too, Nilsen covered Stephen's body in talc powder. And from what I can gather, it's kind of the same thing as baby powder. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it gives you this white cast on your body. And this was his way of almost speeding up the look of decomp, because he wanted him to look dead. And so he covered his own body in this talc baby powder combo, and then also Stephen's body in it too. He then arranged 3 mirrors around Stephen's body and his own body so he could watch himself with Stephen's dead body.
Okay.
So this is kind of going back to the whole, he finds the dead male body beautiful.
Right.
So, and that's his quote. He finds it very beautiful and attractive. And in the show, I guess we could just talk about it. It's called Des, and it's on Prime Video.
Prime,
yeah. They did a fantastic job on that. And after doing research and watching the show, it's all like very word for word, fact for fact. Yep. Yeah. So it's not like they kind of went off on their own and tried to make it more extravagant or anything, or add these details that didn't need to be there.
It's very, when we talk about the author's name one more time.
Brian Masters.
Okay, so from some of the interviews I've watched of him, he was very much the same way. So he had never written a book on
this kind of stuff.
Yes,
yep.
But he knew somebody was going to write a book, and it's almost like he didn't want that person to sensationalize and just try to get rich off of horrific crimes that happen. He wanted to know, and in the show they kind of use the word not understand,
comprehend.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So he wanted to comprehend what was going on in the mind of Dennis Nilsen, and why somebody would be driven to this point, or what got him to here. It's kind of that nurture versus nature.
Right. He said he wrote the book almost as a warning to people. Yeah, this is what happens if you have this upbringing and things happen to you. Not so much what he did, but who he was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, like, to your point, his book, that book, and the show Des on Amazon Prime is also, it very much is just to tell the story of. Yeah.
Also, Des is his nickname, just so you know. D-E-S. Yeah, that's what he goes by. His friends call him that, and that was what he asked to be called by the investigators and Brian Masters when they were meeting up and stuff. So it's not just some random word. That was his nickname. Yeah. Obviously, we're calling him Nilsen and stuff during this whole time, but yeah. So, like I said, something about the dead male body fascinated Nilsen, and something that was brought up when he was getting investigated and when they were trying to get this information for his book was, he was asked by Brian Masters what it was about the dead male body, and once again he said he just found it beautiful, and they said, well, when did this start? And he said that sometimes with past partners they would put this powder on themselves, and then Brian said, okay, then what would you do after you would put the powder on? And he goes, we would just look at each other, like in the mirror and at each other. So I'm not really sure what we want to do with that, but obviously, I mean, this goes back so far. So now it's kind of the combo of an actual dead person, and I mean, this is like the best scenario for him. He has something that's not going to leave him now, and it's an actual dead person, and it's a dead male body, which he finds the most,
and he can appealing. Make it look the way that he remembers looking with the former partner. Wow.
Yep. So after he slept with Stephen's dead body, He then began the drunk process of dismembering the body and storing the body parts in plastic bags. As he had done at the Melrose apartment, Nilsen then, this is a part where it gets a little bit icky, but something that he did at the Melrose apartment that I was kind of saving till now is he would boil the heads of his victims. Not all of them, but after he was done dismembering them, he actually had a huge pot on his stove that he used specifically for boiling the heads. And this was what he said it was for, was to separate the flesh from the skull. And actually, a lot of stuff actually got evaporated in the boiling process. So at the end, there wasn't too much to clean up. There was some of the flesh part was left over, but then the skulls were also soft, and then he could also dispose of them a little bit easier.
Yeah.
This pot was also brought to trial and passed around the jury, the actual pot.
Yeah, and I remember the detectives, they said you can look at photos of the original, I guess, Melrose apartment before.
Which I'll definitely be posting, because I found a bunch.
And you can see, and I actually haven't seen the photos. I, for some reason, didn't choose to look them up. But he said you can see that, the grease stains on the edge of the pots until you realize what those grease stains are. Or, knowing now what those grease stains are.
And who knows? Maybe he used it for, like, spaghetti in between, too. Yeah. He seems fucked up.
But
he
knowing
seems like he'd do that.
Pots were used for.
Yeah, and when he would have these fires in the back too, just kind of talking about like skulls and stuff, he would dig through the fires each time afterwards to make sure there was nothing through, and then he would smash all the skulls like into powder. So he did the same thing after this boiling process. And actually, when they found some of the dismembered body parts, because there was still body parts in his apartment when he was caught, they would find the skulls in there from his last 3 or 4 victims, and the pathologist was able to show that the skulls had a lot of moisture in them and that they were softer, and like parts of them had been heated. And so that's where they asked him, why are the skulls weird? Yeah. And they're like kind of dysmorphed from the heat. And then that's when he's like, oh, it's because I boiled them. Yeah, duh. Very matter of fact, like everything else was. Yeah, exactly. So
makes me think of a Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So the flushing of these last few victims is what actually got him caught. So I don't know if you remember in the very beginning when I was talking about the tenants were throwing a fit because their pipes were blocked.
Right.
And they decided to all get together and write a letter to the super. And we actually find out later in this weird kind of turn of events that it was actually Nilsen that wrote the letter on behalf of everyone. Yeah, super weird because nobody.
Almost like you never suspect the guy that calls
exactly.
It out.
So that's kind of what was in my notes too. Is like, why did he do this? He was trying not to stand out too much. Like, you would look at the person who's like, I don't want to be involved, and like the people that are like, I don't want you to search my house. Well, now I'm curious, what's in your house?
Exactly.
So if you're kind of like, yeah, I'm totally with you guys. Let me write the letter. But everyone that was interviewed in that complex was like, yeah, we don't really know him that well. Like, it's really weird. He's kind of weird.
Calling back to a few episodes ago, Stephen McDaniel, he didn't want the police into his apartment, and that made him suspect him even
also,
more.
They just looked at him and were like,
Hey, motherfucker. So interesting. Yeah. So he was the one that actually said,
wrote the letter.
Let's get these people. But I guess he's not. It makes you wonder. I wonder if he's just hoping, hey, maybe these people, the plumbers can just clear the shit out so then I can continue doing what I'm trying to do. I need more space for it again.
So now we kind of find ourselves back at the beginning, which is technically the end, where he's caught. And this is kind of where I won't get too far into it because this is kind of like the boring part. But as far as like his arrest and confessions and, we kind of went through the victims and his like MO and everything. But after he was arrested, over 30 hours of interviewing came. And I mean, just in like 2 days, he was just in there nonstop and they kept him up. And when asked why, he had no good answer. He just said that he was hoping the police could tell him why he did this. And he was adamant that none of these murders were planned and they had all been spur of the moment. Nilsen got into more detail about what he did with the bodies after they were dead. He didn't really have a problem talking about it, but he could never give anybody answers why, which you can imagine was like the main question, like, why in God's name did you do any of this?
Well, one of the quotes I remember the author saying when he first reached out to Dennis Nilsen when he was in jail, I guess, or I guess he wrote to him, and he didn't realize that when you're I guess a convict up for possible murder, that you're not supposed to be able to contact those inmates. But he said, yeah, it was kind of just blind stupidity that I tried to reach out to him, and one of the first things Nilsen wrote back to him was the burden of my life, or something, the burden of me is now onto you.
I pass it on to you.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like, yeah, Dennis Nilsen is not sure why he did these things, and he's passing it on to someone else to figure out why.
Right. And
interesting.
Something else that is so apparent that comes through, and the whole Des series, it's only 3 episodes on Prime Video, and I think it's like $8 I paid for it, which I did not. I should have looked how many episodes it was, but either way, I needed to watch it for this anyway. So, but they're about an hour long each, and from what I could tell, it was so spot on from the actual research, so I can't imagine this part being not spot on, but they really touch, especially on the last episode after he's caught and he kind of talks about his victims, and they kind of touch on the background of them, kind of like we did here in this order, that the very last episode is about his trial, and they do a really good job of it, because this is the most boring part of any true crime thing, is the trial, and there's so many years of appeals and resentencing, and oh my gosh, plot twist, I found another piece of evidence, or now they didn't leave this in here, so now I have to do the trial all over again, or it's a mistrial, whatever. It's the worst part of the whole thing. I could never be in law. It's just so freaking boring, and it's terrible. But they really touch on his mental instability. So while he does come off extremely smart, he is very back and forth on so much, and they really show a lot of these visits that Brian Masters, the author, when he meets with him to get information about this book, you can tell he's so uncomfortable and unsure about what's going on, because you think you're going in, and this guy's, you can tell Nilsen is smart, but he's also struggling with something, and it's some psychiatrists that were called in the trial. There was psychologists and psychiatrists from both sides that were there to argue if he was mentally sane or not when he did all this. They really kind of can't come to a conclusion. I don't know if they're getting different versions of him. One said he's totally quote unquote normal. So that obviously helps in the prosecution that he was of right mind when he did this. And then there's people that are like, no, he's schizoid and he's bipolar and he has abandonment issues. So we don't really know what we're getting. But when they show him visiting with the author, he's all over the place. Every time he meets with him, he's angry, or he's confused, or he's mad at him that he didn't write a certain section the way he wanted him to, or he's mad that his dog hasn't been checked in on, or he's mad that he didn't get cigarettes, or he's mad that he has to wear jailhouse clothes, but he hasn't been convicted yet. So he fired and rehired his same attorney like 7 times. And then finally, when they went into court, you would think after he's confessed to all this and he has details and he knows some names, and he's been like, yep, I totally did this. He went in there with a plea of guilty. Because how could you not? There's all this stuff pointing against you. And then last minute, he fires his attorney, decides to represent himself. Then he hires a new attorney, a solicitor as they call it over there, a new attorney that tells him to plead not guilty. And this is where the whole of sane mind comes in. Or what do you call it? Of sane mind. It's anyway, it's called something else too, but basically it's an insanity plea. It's the equivalent over there. It's basically the same freaking thing. Where were you in your right mind when you did this or not, kind of thing. So now the prosecution has this huge burden of going through all of the evidence, all of these documents that were sent to his author that he's working with. They get to go through all of that, and they try to decide in the details, was he guilty? Was he actually thinking through? Right. So that was the whole thing. So basically that's what they had to do until the very end. And they had to call witnesses, and they basically had to beg the Carl Stotter guy. If you remember, he's the one with the zip tie from the sleeping bag. they had ended up finding him years later, and he thought that this was all a dream. So he was in therapy for what he thought was a dream. Then they approach him and they were like, we actually think you were almost a victim of this Dennis Nilsen guy. And he's like, no way. He's like, I would have remembered this.
Yeah. So they basically had to prove to him first, hey, this really happened.
This really happened. Then they had to basically beg him to get on the stand because he was so traumatized.
Yeah.
And then when he was in there, then the defense was like, well, you know what? You were probably drinking a lot, so you're probably lying.
That is one of the things that I remember is that you are talking early 80s where being gay, we talked about earlier,
openly gay,
finally legal. Not legal to marry, just legal to be openly gay.
Yeah.
That even if you had evidence of victims, if they were gay, it was almost like, oh, we're not really worried about that.
Yeah.
Thing. Almost like we're just going to brush it to the side. Like,
or you asked
whatever
for
you
it
say.
because you went home with a guy that you don't know.
Exactly.
I mean, chicks have to deal with that stuff on the stand too, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, so it's almost like...
You brought this upon yourself. You went home with the stranger. Then you started drinking with the stranger. Also, you're gay, so we already hate you for that.
He's here, and this guy has already basically admitted to killing 12 people, and this guy's trying to testify saying I was almost victim 13 or 16 or 17.
Yeah, I mean, if you could see the show, this kid is like so traumatized. He's also done interviews.
Tell him maybe it was your fault.
They just like ripped him apart, and I feel so bad because they had to beg him to like, please help us put this guy away. And he was like, I really don't want to, but I guess I will. And then once he's up there, he's just like screamed at by this defense attorney. And it was said that they had to take so many breaks for him because he was like hyperventilating up there, being in the same room as Nilsen. Finally, at the very end, when it came down to the jury, they couldn't agree on the first day. And then the judge asked, do you think you'll come to a conclusion today? And they were like, probably not. So then they said the next day, I'm going to take like whoever has the most votes. We're just going to go with that. So that's when they found him guilty on like every charge of murder and attempted murder too. So they actually got those charges too.
Wow.
And it was said that Nilsen was kind of like, good job, guys. You got me kind of thing. Like he wasn't even really that mad about it. So
he's like, you can't tell me why I did it.
Yep. And he said that he actually enjoyed the company of the detective and the author. And he said, you know what, guys, feel free to come by and visit me anytime.
Jeez.
Yeah. And also, I don't know how, if I didn't see this in the research, but once again, this is in that show, and they were pretty spot on with everything. But something that came up was that we have so many people that aren't identified, and it was said that about after 3 to 5 of these victims, this task force was actually told to shut down because there was so much money being used in resources to find the people that the people above were like, you know what, we basically have enough to charge him, so let's just be done because this is a lot of money. So Detective Peter J like threw a fit, and he's like, we have so many families that don't have answers yet. Like there's so many people that are coming to him on the side that are like, my husband, he never came back from the store one day or whatever. And all these people who were like, yeah, my dad said that he was going into town and he never came back. So he has all these people that are coming to him with family members that might fit this profile, that are like, maybe he is, maybe he's not, but he's being told he can't do anything about it. So there was actually 1 or 2 victims that were identified after this case was closed that could not actually ever be linked to him because it was after it was closed, if that makes sense. So they did like some side work and were able to identify these 2 people, but weren't ever able to legally pin them to Nilsen because it was already closed.
You can't, no double
and there's
jeopardy.
still people that haven't been, to this day, that haven't been linked to him that pretty sure, I mean, there's bones and flesh that we don't have any names for still.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, that kind of brings
we probably will never know.
No, but it does bring it all around, I guess, to wrap this episode up. As you guys will tell, this has been I think the longest episode we've done so far, for sure. But the reason being is because there are so many victims.
Yeah.
That to think, one, there's more victims that we don't know of that we know of that we don't know their names.
Right.
And then probably more victims that we don't know of that we didn't know.
And their backstories, because one of them was 14, one of them was 16. I'm not saying they mean any less or more than the people that were older, but they're children.
Exactly.
And who knows, some of these unidentified ones are also children.
No, and that is one of the things we want to do on this podcast is obviously bring you guys the stories of people like Dennis Nilsen, Stephen McDaniel, but also moving forward, we also want to bring the victims to light too. Yeah. Because
I would really like to do some ones that really are not like super out there.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe some younger people too. Maybe just some like people of color that don't get a lot of coverage. Mm-hmm. I mean, like there's just so many people that don't have as much coverage as Dennis Nilsen. Granted, this one is like super big. This one's just very interesting.
Yeah. And we're just getting started.
Exactly. There's so many. And honestly, if anybody wants to reach out, I don't know who's out there, anyone and everyone. If there's a case that you know of,
please,
that hasn't got like anything, totally.
And this is I think the second episode this week that we've uploaded, and this is a trend that we want to continue. Yeah. And
I would love to do even smaller cases in between these big ones.
Yes.
So, and it's better than nobody covering it. So even if it's something small.
Anything.
Yeah, even if it doesn't even have that much information.
We've got a lot of ideas turning and churning and burning. And a lot of it has to do with bringing to light the victims of these cases, because that is the people that are truly... And obviously, we are all here, and we understand. We've watched the TV shows and the movies and the series regarding these, I guess, serial killers or murderers, and you really don't get to hear a lot about the people that actually suffer because of it. Well,
I know that was a long one, but there was a lot of information in this one.
Worth it too.
Yeah,
definitely worth it.
Yeah.
I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Again, I think this video is actually going to turn out okay.
Okay.
Then we're going to make it work. Yeah. So you guys can actually see us. If you guys are watching the YouTube video, this dog has been sleeping here on the bed behind us. He's a sleepaholic. So
he's our mascot, Sir Tito. His name's Tito, but we call him Sir Tito.
Literally this entire episode he's been sleeping here.
But he also did that all day today, all last night. He just loves sleeping. For such a small dog, he needs so much rest.
Gosh. All right, well, thank you. Thank you for bringing to light all of that information.
Yeah, I know it was a lot, but I'm actually super stoked for yours next. So you're going to do the next one, and I'm going to be the cool sidekick.
Ooh.
In bewilderment about all the facts you bring
And if I can point out this fact that I realized like half an hour ago, your headphones are on backwards.
What?
No, there's no, don't worry, there's no...
I guess this still works though, because I can hear,
it still works. We're in stereo, but we're not.
You would notice that, you're OCD.
Well, I mean, they've got an L and an R for a reason.
Okay, well, this is a good time to end.
Oh, gosh. All right, well, my name is Riley. That is... Mm-hmm. Do you want to say your name?
Yeah, Christian.
Christian.
It's 2022. I have all the rights you have, so...
That's right.
Yep.
This has been True Crime Banter. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah. If you did, do, again, Spotify does allow rating. Yeah. Actually, maybe we'll show it on a story on our Instagram at True Crime Banter. I'll show you guys how to rate podcasts. It's fairly easy.
And if you're on YouTube, obviously, thank you for watching.
Yeah, hit the like button if you liked it.
Only if it's nice.
Or
and then
constructive.
True Crime Banter on Instagram, all the things, right? Stitcher, all the things.
Spotify, Stitcher.
Mm-hmm. Instagram, I post some pretty cool stuff on there. So.
Yeah, she's been popping on that
I'm
lately.
trying.
Cool.
I'm really trying.
It's cool. Way better than I could ever do. Way better.
Anyways,
again, my name is Riley.
And I'm Christian.
And we will talk to you next time.
Yep. Bye.
Take care.